I should have called this Shift Left a DevOps and Database Love Story, but uh, but I don't really know a lot about DevOps, so I'm not sure if they're in love or merely getting along really well. Um, my name is Kevin Kline. I've been in the industry since '86 is when I actually started. I was a good Fortran programmer, and I also knew how to write a select statement. And since they hadn't invented stored procedures at the time, that's how we would write conditional code for SQL on Oracle version 5. And we used that to construct the application that managed the life support system in the International Space Station while I worked at NASA. That database grew to be 128 megabytes in size, which we thought was practically infinite in its hugeness. So that kind of keys you into how I started and how I worked on that over time. I got kind of lucky. I had planned to work on a master's degree, and being both ADD and poor to the point of being aggressive about trying to find side gigs, I sent my abstract from my master's thesis to a publishing company, and they said, great, let's publish it. And I finished the book, but not my master's degree. So, but that's led to many other books over the years, including my bestseller, SQL in a Nutshell. I'll be in the O'Reilly booth tomorrow morning signing 25 copies, giving those away. And it's first come, first serve. Our fourth edition came out last year, no, 2022 actually. So it's quite recent. It covers Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, and the ANSI ISO standards. Compares them all to the standards, so you have one book for all the major platforms, both commercial and open source. So if you have questions afterwards, kevin.kline@solarwinds.com. Also, I'm on all social media, K.E. Kline. I tried to use K.E. Kline to differentiate myself from the actor of the same name, but it doesn't work. I still get about 2 or 3 messages a month for the actor, and they tend to fall into 2 categories. People who have worked with him in the past and had positive things to say. They're like, hey, I worked on the lighting on DeLovely with you, and I wondered if you were in town at this time, because they saw that he was good. The other kind, which I especially love, are things like, we'd like you to come to the Melbourne Film Festival and be one of our judges. I'm like, send me the first class tickets. So that one's a couple years old, but that was one of my favorites for sure. So yes, K.E. Kline, get in touch with me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, also, this is a vendor session. So that means I will talk about vendor products a lot. Forgive me if that turns you off. I know that many of us don't want to be sold to, and that's not my style. But there are some things that I really like about our products that I want to show you that are super cool, and they're not super salesy. The first is, how many of us write SQL code? All right, you're my people. Represent for my peeps. Okay, sorry about that. So we have a free product. All you need is a username. Email. It's called Plan Explore. Super popular. Millions of downloads, hundreds of thousands of users. And what it does is it will show you in red and in yellow and so forth problems in your queries. If you have a stored procedure with lots of different SQL in it, it'll show you which of those are having problems and show you throughout the stack of Transact SQL code if there is issues in there. It's very, very powerful. Not only does it do that, shows you how the query executes, maybe if there's issues in the query. The second major component of Plan Explorer is index analysis. So you can see the histogram of the index here and how it might work well for certain parts of the index. But if you have issues with the way your index is laid out or the freshness of the statistics, it will point out those issues as well. And in fact, the darkened line there, it will also show you lots of specific problems. In this case, that darkened line is telling us where the tipping point is. If you haven't heard of that, that's a particular kind of problem in the SQL statement in which SQL Server chooses to move from a seek operation. It gets enough records that as it performs the seek operation, that it realizes that's less efficient than doing a full scan. So it tips from a seek to a scan. But because of the way our indexes are created, we may have a situation in which it shouldn't have done that, but it did it anyway. So there's lots of really powerful features in this product. Again, completely free. We just had a new drop this week. So if you've been using Plant Explorer for a long time, get the newest set of features. It also gives you right in the middle part there, that's hypothetical indexes. How much will this query improve if I add or include columns to an existing index? So really, really powerful. So how many of us have worked under the DevOps methodology? Okay, great. I would say that's a majority, about 60-40. I kind of think of DevOps as it's just a mindset, really. It's not necessarily a rote set of steps that we have to follow in an extremely specific workflow, but it is a way to approach our problems from beginning to end. Simplicity is essential. Regularly reflect on continuous improvements. You know, those are the kind of things that are almost a philosophy as much as they are a specific set of actions. You know, I mentioned the Oracle project I worked on for NASA. That was using a technique called waterfall. Anyone use waterfall? And you know, you get to the end and then the users from a year before tell you, oh, well, now that we see what you've written, we are not really sure that we gave you the best requirements, right? And so we need you to spend another 4 or 6 or 8 months changing, you know, to meet that scope. So that was a pain, right? So Agile iterates frequently, makes changes frequently, and continuously integrates those into production. And it's a better way to approach things. One of the big problems that still exists is, and part of the reason we, as an industry, implemented DevOps is because we wanted to bring the operational staff closer to the development staff so that there weren't a lot of surprises for them, ops. When I worked as a developer for 6 years, I loved to just throw the whole project over the fence to the ops team and implement it, right? Get it running, and then I just like, I'm done. And then we even had, at that time, our structure was we had separate teams to do maintenance, right, and support. So I kind of like that because I like building new stuff. It's like, hey, Legos, hey, what could be better? And the DBAs that I worked with at that time hated me. So, of course, I soon became a DBA. And I hated me. So, so one of the issues that we have with DevOps as we lay out our project plans is that what we found over time, you know, if we were going in a Gantt chart style or critical path style, we start at the left, we work through our workflow, and you have already seen in the industry the rise of something called DevSecOps, which is the idea that let's not throw it over the fence and then let all the security team figure out how to do security. We need to bring it and shift that left into the earlier stages of the DevOps process so that we don't find out about security issues months down the road from real users, right? You don't want your users to be your QA testers. What I'm kind of proposing today is the same sort of concept. What we do so often today, and please, I want to hear your stories if you do it differently. What we find is that developers are given a set of requirements that they are to code to, and it says you have to produce this report. It needs to look like this. Here's the data that we want. You know, your business users tell you all of those kinds of things as part of your requirements. Maybe a screen needs to look a certain way, you know, all of that kind of functionality. But nowhere in those requirements does it say we need that report to run in 30 seconds or less, right? We need this particular sort of month, quarter end, or year end roll-up process to be able to finish within 2 hours, even though we're doing a massive amount of analytics. So it's the concept I'm proposing is let's bring our performance testing and shift that left, because a lot of times what happens is we let the users be our QA testers, and I'm almost out of time already. Okay, so let's bring that left and include our database performance testing as part of our development process. So an example is we've got a situation in which we're seeing timeouts, we're seeing issues. So we have deadlocks, we have key lookups, we have lots of issues there. And our change requests, our tracking, our bureaucracy around this is not helping us. We don't see an obvious issue with the performance problem. Or we're in a situation where it's just part of the regular rollout process for the dev teams to continuously integrate new code, but we don't see a smoking gun. So in a situation like that, let's take a look at a demo concept here. And I should point out that the demo I'm going to show you in a moment was developed with a couple friends, Paul Anderton and Mark Allison at Sabin.io. At that time, they were at Sabin.io. And so what we have here is a situation where we've got our product, SQL Sentry, which is our marquee product for SQL Server. We do have other monitoring for Oracle and Postgres and such. We've got it set up in its own domain with a domain controller, DNS service, etc. We have a workstation there. And then we have two SQL servers, pre-production and production, okay? And what we know is in the last iteration or two, we've been seeing a dramatic rise in key lookups. And key lookups is an anti-pattern. It's a situation that is not ideal, okay? Now, if I go back one slide, where it said SQL Sentry, there are a lot of ways you could monitor this. You don't have to use SQL Sentry specifically for this. You can use many different monitoring tools. However, mine is the best. So having said that, let's take a look at our demo. And this will take me just a moment to set up, so please bear with me. And I'm going to have to go, I don't have Visual Studio and all that stuff, so I'm going to have to go back to a recording of this video, of this demo. And, all right. So we've got a SQL Sentry, an instance of SQL Sentry running against our server. And let me pause this just for a second. I'm going to go back. Sorry about that. So let me just make sure you get a basic idea of what is happening here. There is this blue vertical bar in the middle. Everything to the left is the Windows OS, okay? So at the very top, we have network. On the second graph, we have system CPU. And is that maybe orange or, I'm colorblind, so I apologize. There's it looks like a big amount that's gray, and then a little bit that's a different color, brown, maybe. That brown is the OS, how much CPU is being consumed by the OS. The other amount is how much SQL Server is using. Then we have we have disk, and we have memory, and then we have disk at the bottom. And then on the right-hand side, everything on the right-hand side is SQL Server itself. So at the very top, we have basically how busy it is. It's the batch per second, compiles per second, recompiles per second. The second graph is key lookups and forwarded records. Both of those are anti-patterns. So we show those to you right there on the screen as it happens, okay? Then we have all the wait statistics. Then we have a SQL Server memory, and you can see side by side, OS memory, SQL Server memory, and then finally at the bottom we have I/O. So if, for example, we saw a big spike in I/O on the Windows side, but not here on the SQL Server database side, we know at a glance that something is happening outside of SQL Server that's causing this massive spike in I/O. So that's what's happening on this screen. So now imagine that we're going to go ahead and start a project, and we flip over to Visual Studio Team Services, and we're going to deploy some new code here. So we Okay, got 5 minutes, and I believe this is an 8-minute video. So we're going to try and scoot along here, right? So we create our new a bit of code that we're going to put into our pipeline, and it's going to go into the pre-prod environment first and then into production. And one of the things that is really neat about this whole pipeline process is that you can create what is called a quality gate. So this is a feature of Visual Studio, okay? And so when we create this particular project, we can deploy first to pre-prod, and then over into production. And basically what we're doing is we're integrating the monitoring of SQL Sentry, telling us everything that's happening before and after each change happens from our code. So when we hop back to SQL Sentry, we can look at the behavior of SQL Server and notice right across the top there, we have a big change in the busyness of the server, and you can also see that there are some issues with the key lookups. So then we can pop over to the top SQL tab, and we look at the query sub tab there, and we can see when it started. We can see if there's a large number of reads or writes happening. We can see what its performance impact is on the system. And so we can even see things like, do we have index seeks as opposed to index scans? Typically, not always, but typically we want those seeks rather than a scan in most cases, especially if the query is designed to return a limited result set, okay? So then we can even do roll-ups. We can look at the total number of queries or executions of that query. And again, another thing that is happening here is that Mark and Paul have written a set of scripts that will write into SQL Sentry and tell you whenever, it's basically a deployment marker, okay? It says, that's when we deployed to the pre-prod environment. And so now we can tell, and as it says here on the screen, that we have a change deployed into the pipeline. And as a DBA, that was something I always struggled with. I'd have to call the different dev teams and say, hey, did you make a change? And usually they'd be like, who, us? What? Do we write software? I don't think so. So, you know, it's a problem. People would they thought they were in trouble, right? What we want to do, though, is we want to get closer, be more friendly, more interactive with one another. So we can see on the key lookups that it has a spike. We can also go to the specific point in time and look at that data, and we can see that we don't have a little bit of lookups. We have almost 200,000 lookups with this new piece of code. The developers didn't mean to do anything wrong. They just wrote the queries, they worked, and that's all our requirements said. But because we can watch it now, we can see if any of these anti-patterns introduce an issue into our process. So we could say, you know what, that's one, although the deployment succeeded, that's not one we want to approve. We want to reject that because it's not good code, right? It's not as good as what we know we can do. So we reject that one. Again, we're working side by side. We've got the Visual Studio, I believe it's Team Foundation Services. In any case, you could be using GitHub. You could be using some of the other source code systems. So now we're back to a steadier state. You can see time is moving on and the graphs are moving. And what we're going to do now is see if we can fix the problems that we had. Okay, we're down to 1 minute. I am not going to make that 1 minute deadline, okay? So what we're going to do is rewrite that query. Also notice that there's that little triangle there on the weight statistics. That is telling us we have a missing index warning that started at the time of the deployment and carried on throughout. So now let's fix those indexes because we know that this is our problem. So how do you fix a key lookup? One of two ways. One is either to write an index that will be indexed on that one particular column, or if we have a serviceable index already there, we can use the keyword include and include that column in the code that we are going to deploy, okay? So we walk through that here as well. We're going to create the project. We've got a fix now. The developers have gone away. And we're going to wait for the release for a moment or two, re-enabling the graph. We're seeing, all right, some performances changes are happening. And now we're going to take a look at the execution plan and see how that looks. The number of reads and so forth. And are we happy with that? Well, average number of read requests over 2,000. So we're probably not happy with that. And I'm being told that we are at time. So basically what we can do is we can iterate on that code, come back and check, just look at the graph. And you can tell instantly whether the code you are deploying to production degrades, is neutral towards, or improves performance, which is something that most developers never know until sometime afterwards when users start complaining. So now we can integrate this entire set of activities into our regular activities with literally very little additional work, just a very small amount of additional work, okay? So got to go ahead and close this down. So to fix a key lookup, a quick recap on that. I always think of a key lookup as if you're reading a book and you go to the index in the back, topical index in the back, and it says, go to page 175. You go to page 175 and it says, this is actually more related to topic B. And so, oh crud, put your finger there, go back to the index, look at topic B, and it says go to this other page, right? So it's kind of, you're looking between two different sets of keys to find your answer. So that's how we fix this particular problem, but it could be for any problem. All right, so with that, I want to thank you for your time. We're out of time. I do request that you take a moment and give me your feedback, good, bad, ugly, what have you. Feedback is a gift. You can get not only this tool, but other free tools that we have for database people at SolarWinds.com, free tools. And if you use SolarWinds, we have a event coming up in May. And if you're interested, please register. Tell them I sent you. I thank you, and my children will thank you that I'm employed. So with that, everyone, I appreciate your time very much. Hope to see you in another of my sessions. Thank you.